we have our dear friend and partner, Alix. She's going to be talking all things religious OCD. I know that's a really big theme that people struggle with, and can be sensitive and just really challenging. So we're so excited to have Alix just give her story and talk more about that. One quick thing is that at the end or the last half of this webinar, we're going to be doing a Q&A, which people love. It's an awesome part of the webinar. And so if you have any questions for Alix, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. It's at the bottom part of the screen towards the right. We tried to avoid putting it in the chat because it gets a little crazy in there. So if you wouldn't mind just dropping them in the Q&A box, we'll get to that at the end and try to get through as many as we can. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Alix. She's going to introduce herself and then talk about her experience with religious OCD and just OCD and recovery and where she's at now and her faith. And we're so excited to listen. So here you go, Alix.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Alix. I have an Instagram called Recover OCD, and that's where I post all of my content. I'm 28 years old and I've struggled with OCD since I was like 13, but the religious OCD started when I was 16 when I had just first become a Christian. I grew up Jewish, so this was just like all new to me, and I had dealt with like different types of OCD in the past, but when this one came up, it kind of just like changed like my life drastically because it was so debilitating in like a different way. So because I was new to Christianity, I didn't know that much, and I would read a lot like on Instagram, like the Bible, like listen to worship music, watch YouTube videos, and I would just be like plagued with intrusive thoughts. So it could be like sexual, violent, like all of the above, from the time that I would wake up in the morning into the time that I would go to bed at night. So it was just like 24/7. I didn't feel like I got a moment of peace. I had so many compulsions that I didn't know were compulsions at the time. Like I would write down on the notes app on my phone all the bad thoughts that I had throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, I would go tell my dad and be like, are these bad? Like, does this mean I'm not a Christian? Like, all the reassurance seeking. And then like my main theme within the religious OCD was that I committed this unforgivable sin and I was going to hell. And you can imagine being like a new Christian, like having that thought in your head is very scary. Um, so I kind of like hit rock bottom very quickly. So like I said, I would confess, I would write all my thoughts down. I would pray over and over again, like asking for reassurance and telling God that these weren't my real thoughts and that it was all OCD, and it just became very, very compulsive. And so I remember I was just like, I didn't even know exposure therapy was like a thing back then. This was like over 10 years ago when I was 16. So I think it existed, but I just had no idea what it was. So I was like doing a lot of reassurance seeking also from like local pastors, like telling them all the thoughts I was having and like saying, am I going to hell? And this whole time, like I was reassuring myself, and I didn't know at the time, but that was just fueling the OCD cycle, and really just prolonged my suffering. And so I remember like I was seeing a Christian therapist at the time, and she was kind of like just helping me learn more about religion, but at the same time, she was also reassurance seeking me. And like I said, at the time, I really needed that support, but it definitely was very detrimental to my OCD. Um, and then I remember I was just like on YouTube one night and I was like crying. I was just so depressed, and I would like pray constantly for God to like literally take me out of this world because I just like could not deal with this pain anymore. And I saw on YouTube like a Christian artist came up, and it was 10th Avenue North, and the lead singer just like said something that really resonated with me. And like in that moment, I just felt like the love and the peace from God, that I just knew that like he was with me, and that didn't matter the thoughts I was having. Like he knew my heart, he knew my intentions. And so I kind of like subconsciously did ERP on myself. I really tried hard to just accept the thoughts for what they were, and like not compulsively tell myself, but just remind myself that like I'm not alone. Like my thoughts don't mean, they don't have to mean anything. Like God was constantly showing up in these really dark moments of my religious OCD, that I just knew that like I was going to be okay, even though it was such like a depressing type of OCD. And so it took a long time, like months, for me to really get in the swing of like accepting the thoughts and moving on. And like I said, the only thing that really kept me going was like the little signs I was seeing from God. And that mostly came up in like music. When I would just have like really bad days, I would listen to music and certain songs would come on, or I would see certain tweets on Instagram or Twitter. And it just like reminded me like that I wasn't alone. And that's what really got me through it. And now here I am, like over 10 years later, and I rarely get thoughts about my faith. Like they'll pop up every once in a blue moon, like just random. But going through all the themes that I've had, I know now how OCD works, and I've been in intensive treatment for other themes that I have the tools to succeed and to, not give into these thoughts. And I also did start medication when I was 19. So, like, about 3 years after I had the start of my religious OCD. And that was a big game changer for me as well. That really just kind of helped, like, quiet the thoughts a little bit and got me through until, eventually I would do exposure therapy. And that would be the really thing that, like, saved my life. But yeah, so like now I'm in a place where I have a great relationship with God, and it's because I've surrendered completely and have just really let go of those thoughts and not letting myself be defined by them. And now, like I said, my faith is great. I have a very good relationship with Jesus. Like I'm just in a really good point in my life right now. And yeah, so that's kind of like in a short summary of kind of how it started and how I got better and just how everything kind of went.
Thanks for sharing that, Alex. I think people would love to hear more about your treatment and like, so you were really debilitated by your OCD and then you weren't. Like, what did you do? Like, what was it that really helped you during that time?
Yeah, so I think it was a mix of kind of like I was actively trying really hard to not get caught up on my thoughts. So like if I would have an intrusive thought, instead of praying or pushing it away, I would just be like, I'm just gonna move on with my day. Like I'm not gonna give it energy. And when that happens and you do it over time, your brain like rewires itself and it gets easier as time goes on. Like the thoughts kind of lessen because you're not giving it attention, and so that was a huge thing. I learned about radical acceptance in exposure therapy. For like ACT, it was ACT and ERP. And I just learned a lot about like disconnecting myself from my thoughts. Like just I don't know if disconnecting is the right word, but like just not aligning myself with my thoughts. That I could have any thought and it could literally mean nothing. It could just be something that pops into my head. Like I have hundreds of other thoughts a day that come up that are weird and I just don't think twice about them. But I think it's also important to note that OCD attaches to your values. So me being a new Christian was kind of like a target on my back for OCD to be like, oh, there's something new that she cares about. Like, let me get on that. And so, like I said, exposure therapy was just like game changing. Um, I didn't do exposure therapy in treatment specifically for this type of OCD. I kind of did it on myself, but all the tools that I learned in exposure therapy, like script writing, the continuing to listen to Christian music, even when I would have these scary thoughts, continuing to read the Bible, even when intrusive thoughts came up, just little things like that, doing what scared me and doing what OCD didn't want me to do, just really, really helped me grow and get better.
That's great. I think you were mentioning earlier how, praying can be compulsive. And I think it's a really interesting topic because, as a Christian, it's one of the practices we do is pray, and that is how a lot of people feel close to God and grow their relationship with God. But it can be really tricky to not use it as a compulsion because, as we know, compulsions are what drive the OCD cycle. Um, so, can you talk more about that aspect and like how you were affected by praying, and did you ever use that as a compulsion, and how did you get out of that with still living according to your values, which one of them is praying, you know?
Yeah, so it definitely became compulsive, like, every time I had a thought that was negative about God, I would immediately pray, and like I said, I think I literally would exactly say, like, "Jesus, like, this is not my heart, like, please, like, this is just OCD, like, I don't mean it," as if he wouldn't know that. Um, but I did that a lot, and, it was really hard to get out of, like, compulsions, whether it's praying or, like, rumination, like, all of those things are just really hard to break. So I kind of learned along the way that if I was having a thought and um, I started having anxiety of that thought, and then my urge was to pray, I would kind of do the opposite, like, only pray when I genuinely wanted, to thank God or to ask, God for something. Only pray when it really felt, like, real and genuine, and that if it ever got, like I said, if it was giving me anxiety, I kind of knew that it was OCD creeping in, and I tried to just really just accept it for what it was and not give in to the compulsion, not pray. And I think you can learn when something becomes compulsive, because it's repetitive and it's after a thought. Like when you normally pray, I mean, obviously people pray in all different ways, but you pray in the morning, you thank God for waking you up, you pray before you go to bed. But if I'm praying constantly after I have a thought, it's a good sign that it's OCD. And so really just uh, letting it go, like letting the thoughts go and doing opposite action was a huge part of my journey too for exposure therapy or other therapies I've learned. Just doing the opposite, and that was kind of what helped me like get out of it, like recognize when it was becoming compulsive, and when I noticed that it did, really trying hard to like break that or at least like delay it a little bit. Was a big part of exposure therapy too, was just like not answering it right away. Like the question doesn't need to be answered right now. If you're worried about it in 5 minutes, reevaluate in 5 minutes. But right now, like I can choose to move on from this. So that's kind of how I worked through that and identified what was a compulsion and what was like real genuine prayer.
Yeah, that's good. It's a challenging part of OCD, specifically religious OCD. So thanks for touching on that. I think for those of you that don't know, I know we've been mentioning like exposure response prevention therapy, and just wanted to make sure that anyone here that didn't know what it is actually knows what it is. So ERP, or exposure response prevention therapy, is considered the gold standard treatment for OCD. It's different from talk therapy. Um, and ERP therapy, you're actually exposing yourself to your fears and to your obsessions. And the whole point is to resist doing your compulsions. And it's different than talk therapy. It's different than a lot of people have experienced whenever you're trying to cope with OCD, because you are exposing yourself to your obsessions. But when you learn how to do it with the right tools, and it's really about sitting with the uncertainty of, you have the obsession, you have the thoughts, and you think, oh, I need to figure it out. I need to figure out if this is real or not, if this is actually me, if, is God really mad at me? Let's go back in my life experiences and think about all the things. And those are compulsions, and doing those over time continue that cycle and make it worse and worse and worse. So ERP helps you learn how to break that cycle by resisting doing your compulsions. And a lot of times in religious OCD, people will pray not knowing it's compulsive and not knowing that it actually makes you worse, but praying and saying, you know asking God for forgiveness all the time for having thoughts, or having a bad thought and then trying to neutralize it by praying. And um, it can be really challenging whenever you're religious and want to pray, but also you don't want to make your OCD worse, right? So just wanted to touch on ERP and what that was for anyone that didn't know. That's NOCD. At NOCD, we all of our therapists specialize in ERP therapy. It's all online. And we'll talk about NOCD at the end of this call. But just wanted to touch on ERP before we got into the next questions, because I think it will help build our conversations about OCD and just therapy in general. Okay. Let's get into, we got some good questions from you guys. Keep on submitting questions in the question box. We love it. All right, first question. How did dealing with OCD deepen your faith?
I think, and I kind of posted about this recently on my Instagram account, that now looking back on my journey, I can see it clearly, but while I was going through it, it was like very, very difficult. But I just remember like being when I started really dealing with these OCD thoughts, I was like, I just want to help people. Like, I just want to share with others that recovery is possible. And if, if I'm dealing with this and there's other people who are dealing with it too. And so looking back now, I think I see why I had to go through it. I just posted today that like my greatest tragedy became my biggest testimony. And that's really been like on my heart lately, just knowing that like I went through that because now one day, if it's just one person I talk to, and they can say that, wow, like, I can get there too. So it's deepened my faith so much because I just know now that even if I don't understand if something is happening, I think there's a Bible verse that literally says like right now you don't understand, but later you will. That's kind of how like I feel about it now. Like I had no idea at the time and I was so angry and upset that I had to go through something so terrible and that almost cost me my life. But looking back on it now, I'm like, okay, like I had to go through that because God had a bigger purpose for me. And I don't know why bad things happen. And, I don't have to answer that question either. But I think it's also like exposure therapy has really helped me and my faith. They kind of help each other with the leaning into uncertainty and like truly walking by faith. Like that's such a big part of Christianity is trusting God even when you don't understand. So they both of them kind of like work together to really help me just accept uncertainty, be okay with the unknown, and just really walking by faith, knowing that I may not always understand why something happens, but there's definitely going to be a reason why or a bigger purpose or some lesson at the end of it.
It's a great point, what you're saying about, uncertainty and faith, because you really are taking a leap of faith when it comes to uncertainty. When people have OCD, it really is the intolerance of uncertainty. Um, a lot of times people are thinking black and white and really have a hard time with a lot of things, just not being able to handle the uncertainty. And so, exposure response prevention therapy and religion, I love how you made that connection of just that's it's faith, and believing that I don't know if these thoughts are true. I'm going to live my life despite it. I'm not going to ruminate on them. I don't know if I'm going to hell. I don't know if I don't pray one more time, something bad's going to happen. I don't know. But I'm going to live according to my values and see what happens. And it can
Hmm.
be really, really challenging to do. So thanks for touching on that.
Hmm.
Okay, next question. I was raised Catholic, but don't think I believe in God now. I have gone back to practicing Catholicism out of fear, I think. How do I explore Catholicism and other religions without fear?
That's a good question. I think it's hard to like I guess if this person has OCD, it can be, hard to see where the line is crossed, like exploring religions and not doing it like compulsively. But I think kind of like researching or finding a way to learn about something that like works for you. So whether it's like listening to a podcast about faith or listening to Christian music and seeing if you're connecting with God or, reading the Quran, like whatever the religion is, whatever, the book or the prayer is, I think that just kind of like putting yourself all out there and seeing like what feels right, like what makes sense for you. And I think like just a reminder that like, with all religions, if you walk away, like you're always welcomed back. And so whether it's Catholicism or any other religion, like I don't ever think that you can be too far gone. And that the door is kind of always open.
Totally. I mean, there's so many stories in the Bible talking about people running away from
Yes.
Jesus, and you're always welcome back. And so I love that point that you made. All right. Next question. Let's see. Thank you so much for this conversation. I went through scrupulosity 2 years ago, and it was so challenging after being a Christian for 10 years. Something I've thought about is how the church can unintentionally reinforce OCD because of our values. So, encouraging increased amounts of prayer until you receive an answer. How can we teach or encourage other believers to not do this?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and, I think it's also very, like, generational. I think our generation is becoming a lot more accepting and understanding of mental health issues, like, also in the church, like, I've heard different pastors talk about mental health in a way that's, like, really beautiful and not compulsive, but I think just the biggest thing is talking about it and breaking the stigma. um, I think when you have that conversation, it could really open people's minds, and even if it just, like, changes, one person, but I think education is really important, so, like, reminding people, that OCD, works a certain way and encouraging prayer compulsively and being told like, I know a lot of people are told, "Oh, just pray it away," or, "You don't have enough faith, and that's why you're having these thoughts." Like, that is just so untrue, and I think that it's so dangerous to, like, speak in that rhetoric and that, like, that messaging, but I think, like I said, the biggest thing is education and just talking about it, sharing your story, even if it's just, like, with one person in a church, like, someone who you feel comfortable with, and just like reminding and like educating people that encouraging compulsive behavior is only making the situation worse, and the way to break free from the compulsive cycle is to do the opposite of what OCD wants you to do, and to, like I said, live your life according to your values, not your thoughts or your feelings.
Yep. Someone at another event said, like, you want to live a value-based life, not a feelings-based life. And that like
Hmm.
really hit me because I think a lot of times we want to believe our feelings and our emotions there as truth. And a lot of times with OCD, it's not that way, And so we got to live towards our values and not towards our feelings because, you know, OCD will always attack those. Um, I also think, two things can be true. I think we have a God that can create miracles, but also a God that understands that there are mental health conditions out there and there are the treatments and medications and so many things out there that he provided for us to utilize, I think the people that are like, pray it away or, God can create miracles, God can create miracles, but that doesn't completely erase the point where God also created these different therapies that to help you and support you. So,
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I think that people often forget that, like you said, God created medication, he created exposure therapy, like, he knows how OCD works, like, he's all-knowing, like, again, it's hard the question comes up, "Oh, if God is good, then why is this happening?" But I think for me, at least, I view it as, like, we live in a broken world, like, God did not create mental illness, that was a result of what happened from humanity, and he has provided life-saving medications and treatments like exposure therapy for people, and like you said, like, it's really just about, like, surrendering and leaning into the unknown and, just walking by faith even, if that means not giving through these compulsions as hard as it is.
yeah, totally. Let's see. Mm, How do you engage in renewing your mind in a healthy way?
Ooh, that's that's a cool question. I think, like, exercise is really big for me, that kind of, like, sets the tone for my day, and just kinda getting those, like, feel good chemicals going in the morning really, really change the trajectory of my day and how it goes. So exercising, reading, like listening to music. I'm a big like documentary and like watching like YouTube video kind of person. Like I just love learning about different things. And I think also practicing exposure therapy daily. And that doesn't mean that I'm doing these like crazy exposures, But I really live by the motto, like, do it scared. Like, if you're scared of something, like, the biggest way to get through it is to face it. Like, the only way through is out. The only out is through. So I kind of like really just try to practice as much as possible, like living, doing things that scare me daily. And like I said, that doesn't have to be something huge. It could be like something really small. But keeping like that, because like exposure therapy is like it's like a practice. Like the more you practice it, the easier it gets. Like it could take a while to click. Like it doesn't just happen overnight. But the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. So I think just kind of practicing it as much as possible kind of helps me stay in like the right mind and keeps me like good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in, setting yourself up for success. Obviously, working out and eating right doesn't cure your OCD.
Yeah.
Like that
No.
is, it's not, if people are telling you that, it's not healthy, but I do believe in those things, like I
Hmm.
think working out, reading the Bible, eating right are good things for your body, getting out to the world, having community, that can set you up for success in other ways and just overall health wise. And setting yourself up for success could make you enjoy going to therapy, and to be present at therapy. And so, yeah, I think there's a huge conversation about like, working out and mental health. And yes, it is so real. It's helped me in other ways in my life with depression, anxiety. Truly, that's helped. But for OCD, that's not, you know, always the answer. So,
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I can do those things and still have terrible days. Like I've had those days and like a big thing that I actually didn't mention was that like I'm still in therapy like twice a month. So I'm not at the level where like I need it weekly or as much as I did before. But having, that reminder twice a month from my therapist, just to do things scared, to lean into the uncertainty, like all those things, taking my medication daily. Um, they're all little things that add up. And like I said, even with those things, sometimes I still have bad days. Like sometimes you're going to have a bad day, even if you do everything right. So it's just my old therapist said something really impactful to me that it's not about like having zero bad days. It's about having more good days than bad days. And so that's kind of how I look at it now.
it's a great like perspective on that. I think a lot of people with OCD are like, you go through therapy and then you're like, okay, cool. So I'm going to have all good days from here on out. Like I know what to do. And that's not always the case,
No.
And so I think reframing it to a point of like, okay, we're human. We're going to have bad days, but let's try to focus on having more good days.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Oh, someone asked, by bad days, do you mean you still do compulsion sometimes?
Oh yeah, like even though I shouldn't and I don't like it, there are days where I do give in and sometimes they're not like it's not to the level as it was before, but like I'll ruminate or I'll ask my friend for reassurance. But it's so easy now to kind of like be like, oh, like I'm giving in, like I need to stop giving this attention and go back to what I'm doing. So yeah, there are days and people need to know that in recovery, like you're still gonna give into compulsion some days. Like it's not about being perfect. Um, and you'll go days sometimes without giving into any compulsions, then there might be a few days where it comes back and that's just part of recovery. Like it's not linear and that's okay.
Totally. I agree. And I think self-compassion is huge here in that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to expand a little bit about just self-compassion and you are going to have bad days. You are going to do compulsions more days than others. Like um how would you encourage people when that's happening? And can you just talk about self-compassion?
Yeah, that's actually something that came up in, like, one of my first or second ERP sessions, and somebody recommended the book, I think it's called, like, the Self-Compassion Workbook for OCD, and it's by I think her name is Kimberly Quinlan maybe, I don't know, but her Instagram is, like, Your Anxiety Toolkit, but it's a great workbook, and it really just encourages the person who's reading it to treat themselves the way they would treat a friend who was going through something. And I think that's what self-compassion is. It's like giving yourself grace, giving yourself compassion, realizing that you're human and you're not perfect, you're going to make mistakes. And like if a friend came to you and was having a hard time and were beating themselves up, like you wouldn't tell them that, like, oh yeah, you're right, like you need to be harder on yourself. Like, no, you would say, we all have bad days and like that's okay. So I think just if you like most people extend kindness more to others than they do to themselves. And I think that's just a very human thing that happens. Like we're just harder on ourselves. But even like I said, like just giving yourself compassion, whether that means like journaling or, listening to music or just giving yourself grace and not expecting perfection is like really big.
Love that. I think that'll resonate with a lot of people. So thanks for talking about that.
Mhm.
All right. How did you go about dealing with the thoughts that told you that you were gonna go to hell or something bad would happen after you die if you don't do something? So, i.e., reading a scripture or Bible every day, or if you miss church.
Yeah, that was definitely a hard one. And like I said, it was probably one of the worst, like the darkest periods of my life, that thought specifically. Because anybody who has OCD knows the thoughts just keep coming and coming and they don't stop, especially when you're like actively trying to push them away. So it actually didn't drive me away from my faith. Um, it kind of just drove reassurance. So I was asking pastors, I was on Reddit posting on forums like, am I going to hell? So I those are kind of the compulsions I did, but like I said, it didn't have me walk away from my faith. Um, but I think like looking back, like they're obviously the reassurance seeking and all of that was just not helpful. But I was lucky that it didn't push me away and that, I kept going. But I think also eventually people around me stopped giving me reassurance and they were like, all right, like obviously this isn't working. Like something else is going on here. It's not just natural curiosity. Like you're repeating yourself now. And I was really lucky to have people around me who were kind of saying like this could be something else. Um, so yeah, so I think just what kind of helped me with that was like I said, just leaning in to my faith in ways that made sense for me. So like music was a huge, huge part of my life, especially during that time and it wasn't compulsive. Like I was listening to music constantly because it gave me like peace. It helped me grow closer to God. So I think that's kind of what and God himself, that's what got me through that. And his reminders reminding me that like, hey, like I see you, like I know you're dealing with this, but like I still love you. And during that time, I remember always either seeing verses. The verse that came up for me all the time was that he will never leave you or forsake you. And whether I was reading a devotional or listening to music or scrolling on social media, whenever I was having a hard time, it would come up. And I was like, I just know that's God speaking to me. And that's really what got me through it.
I love that. It's beautiful. Thank you. Okay. Have you dealt with believing certain things are sinful, but all the Christian counsel in your life tells you they aren't, but you still struggle to believe that? It's been a number of different things throughout my life, but my marriage is hanging in the balance right now.
Um, yeah, I think that kind of sin or view of sin is also very generational. Like our generation can see things as sin differently than like what previous generations have. Let me read this question again just so I understand it more. Yeah, I think everyone's relationship with God is different and it's so personal. So I think it can get really tricky with OCD, the feeling of conviction, or is it OCD that's like guiding it? So I think at this time talking to like a Christian counselor, um, or like something like that would be helpful, especially if it has to do with like marriage and or like you not that the Christian counselor will give you reassurance, but can give you like a biblical perspective. And then I always like recommend if it's OCD, like exposure therapy is the best way to treat it. I know like that's not the answer everybody wants to hear, but it is the most effective. So
Yeah, I think it's hard probably whenever you think certain things are sins, but people in your life, your Christian community tell you that they aren't. And I think what you could be, I know we're obviously not going to diagnose, but OCD is a very nagging thing and in your brain, and it's urgent and it feels real. And I think if people on the outside are telling you, this isn't a sin, obviously you want to be careful with reassurance. So if
yes,
people are telling you that you're going to people asking for advice and they say, it's not a sin, um, and that's your one time of asking, and then after that it's reassurance, and I think you need
yep,
to be mindful of that. But I understand where this person's coming from, of just like, you think it's a sin but other people don't. And um it's living with faith and uncertainty of, I don't know if this is a sin, but the goal is, I'm not going to try to figure it out, because figuring it out is what keeps you stuck in this horrible cycle, and trying to figure out what's a sin and what's not. And am I doing it the right way? Is this, if I do something that I think is a sin, does that make me go to hell? But I know it's a sin. There's so many thoughts that go into that. And I think the point what I'm trying to make is learning to live in the gray area and not trying to figure it out.
hmm,
And we want to figure it out. We want to decide because it's a huge deal to us, but learning in the gray area of, okay, I'm not going to try to figure it out it seems counterintuitive, but it's a way that OCD can lessen its power, I think.
yeah, I totally agree. And like I said, you have to be really careful with reassurance seeking,
Yeah.
because that's what drives like OCD. But I think also just reminding yourself that we serve a God who forgives sin, and we're not defined by it. So whether you think it's a sin or someone else doesn't think it's a sin, like at the end of the day, like you still, serve a God who loves you, and you don't have to you don't have to worry about every single thought or everything that comes, like you don't have to give every single thought attention, is like what you're saying. Like you don't have to operate that way.
Right. Right. Someone asks, what practices do you do daily to help manage your religious OCD?
A good question. I think kind of similar to what I mentioned before, but um just doing like things like self-care things daily that will set me up for success. So for religious OCD, if I have a thought or if I like feel an urge to do something and it's making me anxious, I can kind of tell now that that's OCD speaking to me, and not give that attention. But also just like, as a Christian, like I'm listening to Christian music, like on my car rides to work or while I'm working out, like reading devotionals is really helpful, like having a devotional sent to my phone, following, certain pages on Instagram that provide like quotes and like Bible verses. So those are all like little things that I do. But like I said, the biggest thing for me is music. It's really just like changed my whole faith and stuff like that. But yeah, so I would say just doing those little things, those kind of set me up for success, but then also giving myself grace even when it doesn't go the way that I expected it to go.
Yeah, talking about Christian music, do you want to talk more about that and how it's helped you, or if it triggered you, or
Yeah, so Christian music, like I said, it got me through everything. The band, I literally say it's the band that helped save my life, 10th Avenue North, because the lead singer has these video diaries on like YouTube that just go all in about faith and like hardships, and it just helped me so so much. And I just listened to them, and it just was the way that I felt like God was speaking to me. Like I used to get so upset when I would pray and I wouldn't hear like an answer from God. I'd be like, oh my gosh, like he doesn't answer my prayers, like I'm not hearing it. But music was like the way that I connected with him. And like I said, just whenever like I was really really down bad, he just never failed to give me like some kind of sign, like whether, like a lot of the times I'll listen to Spotify playlists and random songs will come on, And so many songs would come on that would just remind me that he was not leaving me. And one of the verses that like really, really got me through that was Romans 8:38 to 39, that there's nothing that you can do that will separate you from the love of Jesus. And that was like a huge reminder that I tried to live by, and not compulsively, but just remind myself that like there is nothing too bad or too big that God can't handle. But like I said, music was like my biggest connection to God. And so I really, really like clung to that, and it got me through so many nights and hardships.
Love that. Makes me want to go listen to some worship music. I love that.
Yes.
Um, is asking God for forgiveness a compulsion, or does it depend on what the thought is?
So I think that asking for forgiveness can be a compulsion, but you have to really like understand like where that's coming from. So if you did something or you had a thought and you're like, oh, like that made me really anxious, how can I make this anxiety go away? How can I feel better? It's probably a compulsion and OCD talking. That's kind of how I look at it. Like I try to understand like, is this something that I'm anxious about, that I'm trying to not be anxious about, or is this like a valid asking for forgiveness because I messed up or because like I felt like, I needed to for some reason. So I think the question you got to ask yourself is, am I trying to make this anxiety go away? And does it feel urgent? Like I need to answer it right now. And if I don't answer it right now, then like it's the end of the world. Those are two kind of ways that I can figure out if it's OCD or not.
Yeah, I do the same, similar things. So it can be hard to know what's a compulsion and what's not, especially with
Hmm.
faith. It's a good answer. Let's see. Is this conversation like its own version of ERP, talking about all of this?
I think it is. I kind of like to treat everything like an exposure. So even just like me talking about going to hell and like you saying like we don't know what's gonna happen, like those are exposures for myself too, because I'm like, you're right, like I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm just leaning into my values and my faith. So I think, yeah, I think it could have been exposure, and it's definitely one for me because this was a really hard point in my life. And revisiting it can be like scary and like not painful, but just like tender. It feels tender because it was a very tough time in my life. But I think like if you're somebody who struggles with intrusive thoughts relating to religion, like this can definitely be an exposure because you're opening yourself up to all these possibilities and conversations and things that might make you scared. And the big thing with OCD is avoidance. So in a way, this is leaning in to the unknown and you're not avoiding, you're facing it. So I think it can be an exposure.
Yeah, I kind of look at ERP as just facing your fears. And
Hmm.
it's a very surface level point of looking at it, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. You're facing
Yep.
fears without doing anything to stop it. And
Yeah.
that looks different for everyone. But I think, facing your ERP has taught me so much more like beyond my OCD, it's you learn. I feel like I'm more comfortable with fear now because of ERP, um, outside of my OCD, even because it's a good lesson to learn of like, you are stronger than you think. You're stronger because you're facing your fears like what every day. You're doing this every day and you teach your brain that you are stronger than it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like ERP is like a lifestyle. It's not just
Yeah.
like like you said, oh, I went to therapy and now I'm done, so I'm not gonna like implement it anymore. It's a lifestyle. It's constantly doing things that scare you, even if it's really small things. So, like I said, it doesn't have to be a huge like exposure, like a life-changing exposure. It can be little things too.
Yeah. I have a question. In what ways do you think you saw God during your OCD recovery journey? And I know it's like it's all a journey and we're still on it, but the parts where you were low, where do you think you saw God? And like what signs did you see or just yeah.
Yeah, so God showed up for me in a lot of different ways. Like I said, music was probably the biggest thing. But I would say like I never like heard him speak directly to me as much as I wanted to. It just didn't happen. Um, but I think music, I think seeing something at the right time, if it was a music video or my favorite, Christian influencers posting on their Instagram story that resonated with me. A big one were devotionals. So if I saw something, on a day that I really, really needed it, I took it as like, oh, like that's God speaking to me. And I think just through meeting other people in my life, like my friends, like my parents, so just ways that like they showed compassion and um their connection with them were just all ways that God used like different people in my life to help me recover. And now like it's still music is like the biggest thing for me. But yeah, I think he's spoken to me in a lot of different ways. And a lot of the nights that I prayed, you know, for this pain to be taken from me, I see it as every morning that I woke up was God's way of saying was, I'm not done with you yet. Like I still have a plan for you and it sucks right now, but you will see why this had to happen. So I just treat every single morning, I know it sounds cliche, as like a gift and if my heart is still beating, then I still have a purpose.
Love that. It's beautiful. Thank you. Um, so you just got engaged, which congratulations. So excited for you. It's a big change and a big event in your life, and that's amazing. I'm sure OCD loves to, get in there sometimes with big events. How have you gone about, I know people tend to ask this a lot, like sharing your OCD with a significant other, or like how do you go about asking for support in that way? So I know it can be challenging for people to open up to important people in their lives because you don't know how they're going to take it. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, that's definitely a big one and something that I think depends on the person, the type of partner you're picking. I've shared OCD with an ex in the past, other serious relationship I was in, and he had no compassion for me. Like maybe he just didn't understand, but there was just like there was no compassion, there was no like grace for understanding that, I was going through something myself. But the relationship I'm in now, I have like a very calm partner who is just like doesn't raise his voice, like doesn't say mean things out of anger. And I think I had to open up once my symptoms started becoming so present and like were interfering with my relationship. And I'm pretty sure I had told him one of the first things I told him was like, "Hey, I have anxiety." Um, and I didn't start with OCD, but eventually it got there. So I think that, if you're in a serious long-term relationship, like your partner will support you. And sometimes it takes time for them too, because maybe they don't understand. Like I know, like if I explain it to some people, they don't understand what OCD is. So I think like encouraging them to learn more, but also not let them be like responsible for your OCD. Like at the end of the day, you have to recover, you have to do it for yourself. And you're the only one who can really change your life and get your life back. So I think choosing a partner who is understanding, is compassionate, is just very important. And who you choose to spend your life with is very important. But I think like I wouldn't recommend like if you just started going on dates with someone to open up and be like, oh hey, I have OCD, like you're all the things I do. Like it's just I just don't think that's necessary unless like you're just an open book and you want to and it's like so important to you. But I think having those hard conversations, like I don't think if you're with the right person, anything will change. Like their view of you. You know what I mean? Like they love you for you. They probably struggle with something too that maybe they're just not opening up with. So that's kind of how I look at it. Like just like I said, choosing a partner who is compassionate and understanding or letting them learn with you.
Yeah. What were some ways that you like truly explained your OCD, or I guess religious OCD in this aspect to your loved ones, if you did?
Yeah, so at the time when I started dealing with religious OCD, I didn't have a boyfriend or anything, so it was really just like my friends and like my parents. And I happened to just be very close to my dad, so I would just tell him like all these thoughts that I was having, and he didn't even know what OCD was. So props to him for just like not making me more scared and um upset. He handled, I mean, he just handled everything with so much care and compassion. And so I would just explain to him, like, I'm having these thoughts that are popping up that I don't believe in. Like, I can't control them. They're just popping up. And I think I kind of figured out I had OCD before him, and I've sent him articles, like learning more about OCD, and he did his own research. He talked to a lot of different therapists for me, like before consultations and stuff like that. And like I said, I just think that he's being honest and open, and um that was he like I said, I'm just really lucky that I had a really good support system of people who like didn't judge me or like run away from me. But I know it's not the same for everyone. Like some people just like don't understand and they choose to walk away from a relationship. But I think that was the big thing, was just explaining that like I was having these intrusive thoughts that wouldn't stop, that just kept popping up and were sticking.
Yeah, that's yeah, it can be a hard thing to do, to open up to your loved ones about it. And so that's awesome that you had a great support system. Um, I love that. Okay, so what would you say to the person right now who's really struggling with religious OCD? Obviously without giving reassurance, but what would you say right now to that person that's, really struggling with it, coming from your experience?
I would say, trust the process, really try to, like, implement walking by faith and, um, really practice leaning into uncertainty, just those little things, like, leaning into the unknown, that as bad as the spot you're in right now, like, there is hope, there's recovery, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I know it's so cliche, but it's true. I think something that helped me was like your your pain is temporary, your struggle is temporary. It's not always going to be like this. If you are a person of faith, then lean into the fact that God has a plan for you, that He would never put you through something alone. He's always there for you, and that you're not defined by your thoughts. Like at the end of the day, you're defined by your characteristics and your actions and the way you treat people. And so you don't have to believe every thought that pops into your head. Like you can choose to walk away from those thoughts.
Love that. Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing your story and sharing wisdom and hope with everyone. I think everybody here really appreciated that. So thank you. Before we wrap up, I really wanted to talk about a really unique, special, and yeah, just a really unique opportunity here at NOCD that's going on until the end of the month. So if you're struggling right now and you may be struggling with intrusive thoughts or compulsions, mental compulsions, or you may not even know what you're struggling with, but you're just struggling. We know a lot of people are struggling right now. And because of that, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month, we have a limited opportunity that we're doing at NOCD. And actually, our clinical experts, so including Dr. Patrick McGrath, he runs our entire clinical team. He's our chief clinical officer, and other leaders such as Tracy Ibrahim, who you may see on Instagram, and other leaders here at NOCD. They're running an exclusive free 15-minute one-on-one consultation call through the end of this month. And there's limited opportunity available. So it's just 15 minutes where you're not only getting to talk to a specialist in OCD, you're talking to the experts in OCD. They run our treatment protocols. They're dedicating their lives to researching OCD, and they don't typically get to do this and get to take new members. So this is a really unique opportunity, and I encourage you to book a free 15-minute call with them. And this is a time, it's private. You can ask them questions and how diagnosis works, what treatment looks like, what living with OCD really looks like. They're really passionate about this, and we're all really passionate about this here at OCD. And it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're really trying to give back to the community during this time. So we just wanted to make sure that you guys on this call knew that that was going on. And I believe it was sent in the chat. Yes, the link for you to book one of those free 15-minute consultation calls with our clinical experts. So just understand that there is limited opportunity. So definitely look into that if you can right away, if you're interested. And again, happy Mental Health Awareness Month to everyone. I wish we didn't have this month, because that means that people are struggling, but we do. And it's a great way to have community and just raise awareness and break the stigma for OCD and other conditions. So wanted to make sure you guys knew about that opportunity. And then secondly, Alix, thank you so much for being here. And you're a great friend and partner of NOCD, and we really appreciate all the things that you do. And thank you for sharing your story as an inspiration to me. And I think it helped a lot of people. So thank
Thank you so much for inviting me and having me. I really enjoyed our conversation and answering the questions too.
Yes, me too. And also this was being recorded, so this will be sent out to you guys via email over the next few days. At some point we'll get it to you. So thank you everyone for attending, and we wish you the best. Bye everyone.